We got Wayne from Woodsball Blast Radius Podcast. All right. Whew. You have a long ass name for your podcast, man.
In retrospect, that probably wasn't the best choice of names, but I look back and it was at the time it was a team venture where the guys I was playing SPPL with were helping me get the show off the ground. So I kind of left it up to a community decision. That was probably not the right thing to do, but we're sticking with it.
Hey, you won in Rome, and you were able to shorten it to 4 letters for the internet. You got BRWP or something like that.
That's right. BRWP.net is the place people can find us online.
That's sweet. You can do little anagram, monogram shirts and such like that. I think it sounds
That's
great.
right.
I think we've got a new venture going for us. So tell us about how you got suckered into doing this podcast, why you're continuing to this day, aside from the fact that, both you and I are making billions upon billions of dollars from our ventures, but we don't want them to know that. So tell me how you got started and a little bit about the show.
We started the show back in July of 2006. I had heard about podcasting from some coworkers of mine. Was impressed with the technology and how it could get a very niche message out to a broad audience. And I was pretty sure paintball was a great topic for that, but I couldn't find a show that I liked to listen to. So I started creating ideas of a show I'd like to, something that I would like to listen to, and started from there. So. We got going with some very simple concepts of marker reviews and reviews of games around the country. Started out pretty small with a couple of contributions from my then teammates, and we've kept it rolling. Basically, my love of the sport is what keeps it going, and the relationship that I've built with some people who are now really good friends, and it doesn't pay off in the billions and billions that you referred to. Maybe I need to talk to you about your business plan for PbLive.
I was just hoping that you were, so that I could manage you and get that 10% off the top. That's all I'm asking. Gross, not net. I mean,
That's right.
I'm not very tough.
So it's paid off in other ways, though. The listeners of the show have really stepped up and. Entering in a raffle that I held just over a year ago, and the proceeds from that raffle sent me down to Australia to play a scenario game weekend there, which was an amazing event. Again, built some great relationships in that part of the world that have really paid off with people I still keep in touch with to this day.
That's bitchin'. And were you as surprised? This is a question that I tend to ask a lot of our guests. Were you surprised at how close-knit the sport of paintball is? You tend to think of, when you start this game, that everyone's really this huge group of businesses, corporations, like any of the other major sports like basketball or soccer. The pros know each other because they get traded around. But you go and everybody's just sort of sitting around, hanging around out, and everybody lives with one another, or they were all teammates at one point, and it's almost like a weird 90210 sort of dating thing in this sport.
Yeah, there are some very interesting relationships among different companies and teams and companies, and it's having seen some of the inside of how that works now, I'm the luster is gone a little bit to some degree, but it's still, I think the sport at its core is what keeps me going. It's not necessarily the corporate end of things that interest me as much anymore. So I try to reflect that in the show. I try to build pieces that help everyday Joe player improve their game and give them insight into some of the things in the industry that they are asking about, some of the things that will help people perform better on the field.
Nice. So what would be your favorite interview that you've done, or your favorite segment?
That's
a little loaded question. That's on the spot. Come on, do it.
That's a tough one. There's some big names that I've been able to get in touch with, and those are always fun to get the perspective of the people who are movers and shakers in the industry, and also even more important than that to me are the people who really got the sport started. So back to people like Randy Wood, Rob Tiger Rubin, the people who really in my opinion, helped put us where we are today with the sport. So those are some of the highlights. But even talking to local scenario celebrities like Paintball Pete in Australia, people who are really dedicated to making this sport better and continue and reach out to more people. And I was impressed, kind of along those lines. I was impressed with you mentioning how Ronan and B and PSM are reaching out to people at non-paintball events. That's the kind of thing that I really would like to encourage, and I'm glad to hear that they have they've stepped up in that direction. So I think that kind of thing will help our sport grow.
It definitely is. It's weird. I've made the analogy that paintball is sort of like the skateboarding or punk rock in the late 70s, early 80s.
Yep.
You know, where people that were into skateboarding were into skateboarding, and they loved it, and they did it because they loved it, and they didn't care what the hype was or whatever. But when it went big with X Games, it went huge.
Right.
And it seems like the sport has waited for that moment for so long. Speedball was based on that, everything else, and now
Sure.
they've sort of given up on it. Went, well, let's go back to roots and going
Yep.
back to the woods. And have you seen that yourself, and just sort of like standing back as a disconnected observer?
Yeah, that's definitely something that I'm seeing start to turn back around, and it's for the better. I think it will bring the attention back to teams like the Hellions that I've got a good working relationship with. Those guys are doing the right thing in making paintball the center of attention for their local community, no matter what it takes. The guys at OK Company up in Oregon, I've recently completed an interview with them, and that's going to come out very soon in episode number 103. And people who have always been there doing the scenario thing, have always been doing the recreational play, the renegade stuff. They're finally feeling like people are realizing they're getting the attention they feel like they deserve.
And do you think it's odd that there are sort of like a small percentage or a large percentage now of players who never started in the woods? It used to be where there was sort of like your roots. You'd start in the woods, you work your way around, you'd see a speedball course, you'd start doing some speedball or do some scenario, big games, whatever. The kids, their first day are starting to do speedball and never had that big game sort of feeling.
Sure, yeah. I can see how that. Yeah, that's a possibility, I suppose. I haven't run into too many of those, but I'm sure that that's the case. I don't think that there's anything wrong with that at all, though. I think any kind of player has something to bring to the scenario paintball field or to the big game field, and everybody's got a different way to approach things, and that's going to make the game all that more dynamic.
Very good. And media in paintball. I mean, we had 180 Paintball on a couple weeks ago talking about starting up from the magazine perspective, and then coming in from the closest thing we have to like a radio perspective. What's
Sure.
it like when you tell people what you do? I mean, because I tell people, hey, I do this paintball show, and their reactions are either like, oh, that's cool, I play paintball. What do you do? I tell them like, oh, I never heard of you. Or they're like, oh, really? So what about how does this tend to bleed over into your real life?
It's interesting. I'll always try to put together a couple of games every season with coworkers of mine, and it bleeds over into when you get a bunch of people who've never played together, or maybe have played a couple of times, and someone who comes on the field with, you've got the gear, you know what you like, and you know what you want to do with it, so you've got the gear to outfit yourself. And the question always comes around, how long have you played? What else, how are you involved in paintball? And it's always interesting. You're right, it's kind of a scratch your head kind of a response when people try to understand, first of all, what a podcast is, and then how that is related to paintball at all is sometimes tough to people to make that connection.